Good morning. Welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. Hope it's been a good week. Hope it's been a productive week. It's definitely getting colder in the UK. I heard it's getting colder in the US as well. So winter is coming. But I don't know. I prefer the summer to the winter, but I know lots of people, it's the other way around. So I guess it's just about finding happiness in what's happening right now. Which feels like a good mantra to live by. Anyway. Let's talk about some Microsoft Teams development stuff this week. A couple of things to talk through, a couple of new announcements and blog posts, and then we're going to end with some speaking stuff that I'm doing next week. That's coming around quickly. Okay, so let's dig into the first thing. So there's a blog post by the Microsoft Teams team, development team, talking about certification, app certification. And app compliance. And this is something that you can do to your Microsoft Teams applications, not just your Microsoft Teams applications, actually, your Microsoft 365 applications. And actually, that's something, just as an aside, let's get distracted before we even start. That's something that I need to get better at doing, because I always talk about Microsoft Teams applications, but as you know, if you've been doing and following some of the things we've been talking about, it's not just Teams now. Teams applications are showing up in Outlook, they're showing up in Office.com, they're showing up in other places in Microsoft 365. It's time to start talking about Microsoft 365 applications, I think. It's not like an official thing from Microsoft, it's just in my head, that's how I'm going to start thinking about these things rather than just Teams applications. So Microsoft 365 applications, the certification program for those. This has been around for a while, this certification program. It kind of gives users and probably more importantly IT admins some confidence that the developer who has written this application has thought about some of the things that are important to those enterprises, about kind of compliance standards, where the data is being held, how it's being transported, what data is being collected, what permissions are being asked for, and all the rest of it. As a developer, putting this stuff together, going through that compliance process is relatively straightforward, but does take time. It can, there's lots and lots of questions to answer. There's lots of things to go and figure out. It's just a case of, lots of questions and lots of things to go through. Something that got talked about at Ignite, but without any kind of mega detail, but now we have the detail. In fact, we have a public preview, is what we're going to talk about this morning, which is a automation tool that can help make gathering some of that compliance information much easier. And this is kind of exciting, actually, because as a developer, it means less time filling out those horrible forms, those websites to go and collect all that compliance information. So the automation tool can automate up to 35% of the certification controls, the questions that you get asked. That's really cool. So that totally makes sense. Things like, the permissions that are being asked for, whether or not you, I don't know, whatever it is, like store data in a database or whatever it is, like so much of that stuff could be automated because it's just code, right? So the code can figure it out. The code can go and look at the application, see what permissions are being asked for, see what type of tokens you're allowing and using, see whether you're doing web redirects, see all these things because it's built into the configuration of the application. So very cool. Two reasons, like the cost saving is definitely one important thing for as a developer, but actually as an IT pro, knowing that actually this stuff has been gathered automatically means it's much more likely to be correct. And also it would be good if there's a way of doing this over time, because applications shift over time, permissions get added or removed. So having a way to keep the certification up to date automatically would be even cooler as well. But I don't think that's what we're talking about here. This is more a way of just making it easier to get through that compliance process, and that's that kind of certification process. All right, so this is very cool. There's a whole blog post about it. It's available today in public preview. You can find it in your Azure portal. So if you go to Azure portal, you can then search for the app compliance automation tool. Kind of interesting that it's in Azure and not in the like the Microsoft Teams admin center or the developer.teams.microsoft.com. Interesting it's not in there. But it's in the Azure one. But again, to what I was saying this morning, it's about Microsoft 365, not just Microsoft Teams. So forward thinking, this is probably a really good place to put it. It doesn't really matter as a developer where it is. We have access to all these different portals. So having it in Azure, fine. I've got no problems with that. So it's in the app compliance. It's in the Azure portal. Go search for the app compliance automation tool for Microsoft 365. And off you go. You can launch it. It's in preview now. You can go and play with it. Go and run it on your application. See what it does. If it makes the process of certification easier, that's brilliant. We need more kind of certified apps. So that's a really good one to take note of, I think. Other things that have been happening, the app manifest scanner for Microsoft Teams apps, Microsoft 365 apps that run in Teams, has been upgraded. The new version is version 15. I don't think there's a huge change from version 14. So the changelog is not yet up to date with the changes between 14 and 15. So I can't tell you definitively. I've done a file compare of the manifest for 14 and 15. The changes, there's really only one small change, and it's to do with task modules, and it's to do with, I can't remember exactly what it is now, but it's to do with, whether or not, like, when you're invoking messages, the link messages, whether or not you're signed in or not. So something like, it's quite small and quite specific. If what I just said made no sense to you, you're probably not very impacted by this change and by this update to 15. If I just triggered a whole load of keywords for you, then go and have a look at the manifest that is out for 15, because it might be that's the thing you've been waiting for. But as far as I can tell from the changelog, there's only really one small change, but we'll wait for the official kind of changelog to come out on that. Just be aware there is a new version now, version 15. So you just need to kind of just be aware of that is existing now, because it will show up in, when you try and get your application through and you try and compile it, you'll probably be told to upgrade your manifest to the latest version and stuff like that. So just be aware that it exists and it's out there. Okay, what else? A single sign-on for Microsoft Teams applications. So for Teams apps, the SSO process. Microsoft have had a really nice SSO flow for Microsoft Teams apps for a while now. Is it tricky to implement? Not really. It's just a bit involved, but they've made it a lot easier by putting much easier kind of ways to like build it into things like Visual Studio Code, to kind of very like easily configure it and like basically walk through a wizard to have it all happen. The news this week is that same process has now come to Visual Studio. So the things that you could do previously in Visual Studio Code, you can now do in Visual Studio. So that's cool. So if you want to add SSO to your Teams app and you want to do it in Visual Studio because that's where you're happiest, you can absolutely do that. And you can do all that using you can do it this way. So this is kind of like doing it all from a file new project, which is, I think, one of the best ways to start with SSO. I often do this. If I'm building an application and I know it's going to need SSO, I will do it, from the start. I won't try and build the project and then like crowbar SSO into it later, because the only way to do that really is manually. So this way you get a lot of it for free, and then you can build your application on top. So from Visual Studio, you can go create new project, go file new, and you can tick this box here that says configure with single sign-on, and you'll be good to go. It will then do all the hard work for you. You can need to put some of the codes and things in. So you do have a little bit of work still to do, but it's way easier than it was before, and means you don't have to kind of think too closely and carefully about doing SSO. So that's all good news. It's nice. Interesting note at the bottom that you do need to actually like build the thing, like a local debug. So I think there's a process that the Teams toolkit will configure a load of stuff for you, but then you need to like run and build it to have some of that stuff built. And it's all kind of scaffolded for you. So if you use Visual Studio rather than Visual Studio Code, you might not have had access to some of that SSO stuff, or you might have been trying to use Visual Studio Code and not liked it, but you wanted to get through it just to get the SSO stuff in, because it's easier than doing it manually. Well, now you can use Visual Studio itself if that's what you want to do. I use both, weirdly, seemingly depending on the type of project it is. I feel like mid and back end and mid-tier stuff, I tend to use Visual Studio. Front end stuff, I tend to use Visual Studio Code. And then I've got apps in both, because kind of are Teams apps back or front end? A little bit of both. Depends how you build them, I guess. So I use both Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. I don't actually have a clear favorite, I don't think. You can. It's basically at the point where you can mostly use them interchangeably now, which is really nice. All about choice. All right. We've gone long again. I went through a period of trying to keep all of these under 10 minutes, and I've been failing at that recently just because I've been talking. All right, let's talk about one more thing, and then I will let you go and get on with your day. That is what is happening next week. So next week is going to be busy because it is the European SharePoint Conference, the SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Conference, happening in Copenhagen from the 28th of November to the 1st of December. There is going to be lots and lots of things happening, lots of speakers going, lots and lots of sessions planned. I'm going to be going, I'm talking on the Thursday morning. I'm talking about Microsoft Teams and how to use Microsoft Teams to do really good business to consumer flows for video calling. So making it really easy for your customers to have video conversations with your staff using Microsoft Teams as a backend. That's what I'm going to be talking about. It's in Copenhagen, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Nice to get over there. I haven't been there for a long time. So that would be really nice. Good to catch up with everyone. If you're going to Copenhagen, if you're going to ESPC, please come and say hello. It'd be lovely to chat with you. And there's lots of other sessions around Teams development, around Teams, around development, around Azure development, around all sorts of development. Lots and lots of sessions, both pro code and low code and no code. And my session is kind of going to straddle both the pro and the low. So it should be a really good week. That's next week, not this week, next week. So look out for that. I will still do a weekly update. I haven't thought this through in a lot of detail yet. I will still do a weekly update, but it may well happen from the airport. So we'll have to see. That'll be interesting, won't it? Okay. Have a great week, whatever it is you're doing. I will speak to you next time, and have a good one.